Hello everyone, this is Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Marc tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This is episode 11, Transistor, a third-person action-adventure game. I guess that's the genre you put it in. I didn't really think about it until now, but that makes the most sense. It is from Supergiant Games, the makers of Bastion and more recently Pyre, and I waited this long to play Transistor because I kept hoping it would come out on Xbox One. That didn't happen, sadly, and at this point I don't think it ever will, and I'm not sure if Supergiant Games will ever release a game on an Xbox platform ever again. I don't know. It's sad because I want as many games as possible to be as accessible as possible so that the majority of people can play them, so I would like the majority of games to be on all platforms. But I finally decided to play it on PlayStation 4. I think it might have been a PlayStation Plus game at some point, or I bought it. I'm not sure. But I was really excited to play it because I was a big fan of Bastion. But I ended up being very, very, very disappointed. And it pains me to say that because there's a lot to like about Transistor. It is beautiful. The story is intriguing. The voice acting is fantastic. The world is interesting. But the combat just did absolutely nothing for me. So the way the combat works is that it's both real time and not turn-based, but you pause the action, and this is a thing that has a cooldown, but you pause the action and then you plan out a set of actions. You have a limit, your action points, you can call them. I'm not sure that they're called that exactly, but you have a limit to how many things you can do in this period of time. And then after you finish planning out what you want to do, you put all those actions in motion. It does it in a sped up time, and then you wait for it to cool down before you can use that again. And during that cooldown period, you can't use any of your offensive abilities, I guess, because I was still able to use my dash ability. But the combat just did nothing for me, and for maybe the first third of the game or so, I wasn't even messing around with the planning. I was just spamming one of my attacks, this one that shoots out these like little grenades in a cluster. I just kept spamming that around enemies, and it was doing fine. I wasn't having too much of an issue. But later on, I started using the planning more because it does help you chain together attacks and deal more damage when you can get behind an enemy and backstab them, and then combo attacks and get damage bonuses and stuff like that. But I never enjoyed the combat, and that's really sad to me because I think there's something interesting there, and I just don't know why exactly it didn't click for me. I like the fact that all of these different abilities that you unlock can be used as either a primary attack as your main attack, or they can be used to enhance your current attacks, or they could be used in passive abilities to give you damage bonuses or whatnot. And there's a lot of customization that you can play around with all these different abilities, especially as you unlock more and have over a dozen or so in your inventory. But I just never really cared all that much, and I didn't enjoy it. It was a real disappointment. I also like that it's somewhat forgiving with the combat and how it deals with death and losing health. So when you are down to no health and you get hit, if you haven't planned anything out and still have that bar fully charged up, you will then be sent into planning mode and can retreat, maybe do some attacks as well, but best to just wait for that cooldown to refresh and not lose that life. But if you do end up losing that life and not retreating or whatever, or some kind of unlucky scenario happen, then you just lose one of your 4 abilities, because you have 4 abilities that are mapped to the face buttons, and one of them will no longer work. It'll be gone for the rest of that battle, and you won't be able to get it back until you visit not the terminals, because there are terminals in the game that provide you with little bits of story, but these function spots, I think, where you are able to change out your loadouts, because you can't just do that anywhere. You have to get to these spots, which are scattered across the world and are very easy to come by. So you have to visit 2 of those before a lost ability will be able to be used again. And I just never got into the groove with the combat. It didn't feel that fun to plan out things, maybe because I found a pretty good strategy that just seemed to work every single time, and it wasn't exciting. The battles weren't exciting. I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this, this, and this, and get it done, and then I'll be on my way and maybe find out more of the story and all that jazz. But ultimately, the combat just left me wanting more, and what that more is, I don't know. I wish I did, because I think there's something there in the combat system. I think it is a unique battle system that I can't think of another game that does something exactly like this. And I think there's something there, but it just didn't all come together for me. And it made me think back to Bastion, which I really, really liked, but I remember the one thing that I wasn't so hot on was the combat. I love the story, and I remember the ending being really powerful. Why, I can't tell you, because it's been so long since I played it, but I remember in that game too, the combat being the one aspect of the game that didn't get me excited, that I wasn't in love with. And that is the same with Transistor. But that's not the only problem I have with Transistor. Another problem I have with it is that it's really short, which isn't a problem, but it ends so abruptly, and I left the game very unsatisfied with the ending and the story, because I was really interested in this world and intrigued by it all, and maybe there's more information than I got. When you get to these certain people who have these cubes functions in them, you can read them and get some information about the people that these abilities were from or whatever. And I just, at a point, didn't care about their little stories because I didn't see what they were giving me. But when you start off the game, you're playing as this character Red, who is this really famous singer who lost her voice. It went into the Transistor, this giant sword she's carrying around, along with this man who got in her way and took the blow of the sword because it was supposed to kill her. And he's the voice in the game and inside the Transistor as well. And I don't know who he is. Was he her bodyguard? I don't know if the game ever really made that clear. Maybe it did, but I'm not sure. And I'm assuming they know each other, though, because he at one point says that he loves her, and at the very end, she kills herself by impaling herself with the sword as well, and that's how it ends. And when that ending came, I kept staring at my screen, waiting for the credits, because I was like, it can't be over yet, because I heard this game was much longer. I thought this game was 6+ hours, and I beat it in under 3. I beat it in about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I didn't feel like I was rushing. I did a few of the tests in this like lounge area you unlock, where you can do tests like speed tests and practice stuff and all this other kind of stuff. A pet dog in there or whatever that is pretty pointless. But I did those. I interacted with a good chunk of the terminals, which allow you to answer certain questions and take surveys and comment on things, and that is a way that Red communicates with this voice, because he can talk, and like I said, she lost her voice, so she will type things and then erase them, and then type things and then erase them. And those conversations were kind of interesting, but there were points where she would write something and erase like 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, okay, let's move on. I'm sick of just seeing you write something out and back and deleting it. But the story just left me with more questions than answers, and that I think is the biggest disservice of the game. I could be fine with combat I don't love if I felt really satisfied with the story and all of that, but having the story be so unsatisfying in the end, on top of the combat not doing much for me, was just that cherry on top that really reinforced my disappointment with the game. It's still something I would recommend checking out if it looks interesting to you, or if you are a fan of other Supergiant games you've played. I would be really surprised if anyone has played Pyre and not any of Supergiant's other games. But if you played Bastion and haven't gotten around to Transistor or Pyre, it's still worth checking out because there's a lot of good in there, and if the combat works for you, I think you'd probably really enjoy it. And it is a short experience. You can get through it pretty quickly, so it doesn't require a big time investment. But for me, Transistor is probably the most disappointing game I've played so far in this series, Attack the Backlog. Not because I think it's the worst game I've played, but because it's the game I expected a lot from, and what I got was something so different than I was expecting. Not to say it's a bad game. I really wanted to love Transistor, but having finished it and unlocking the New Game Plus and all that, I have no desire to go through it again. I feel very defeated with this particular game, just because I wanted to, oh man, I wanted to love it so much, and I just didn't. And it makes me a little bit sad, though I'm still excited to play Pyre, and I'm excited to play through Hades sometime in the future. Who knows when that'll be, but I still am a fan of Supergiant games because I think they do interesting things. They are somewhat experimental. They don't just create the same exact type of game every single time, and they have great artists on their team. They get great voice actors for the games, and the writing is good. I just think in the case of Transistor, in terms of the writing, it just doesn't come together in the end, and then that's the problem with the writing. It's not that the writing in it is bad, it's just that I wanted more from it, and when it ended, I'm like, what? Wait, is it seriously over, or is this like some kind of fake out? And it wasn't a fake out, which really surprised me. I'm still kind of taken aback by the abrupt ending and how short the game was for me, given what I've heard about its length from other people and going to sites like how long to beat. But that will do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am your host, Marc. Y'all can find me on Twitter and pretty much everywhere at PXSausage. The site is, of course, pixelatedsausage.com, where you can find this podcast and the Pixelated Sausage podcast, which are both available on podcast services across the globe like Stitcher Radio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you'd like to check out the video versions of these shows, you can go over to youtube.com/pixelatedsausage. I highly recommend watching the video version of Attack the Backlog so that you can see the game in action. But if you can only listen, that's great too. If you would like to check out my art, you can go over to pxsart.com. If you see something you like, click the link and it'll take you to where you can purchase a print of the piece you fancy. And if you fancy the site in general and everything we do, please go over to patreon.com/pxs and support us that way. And as always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.